Aloha, and welcome to Risk and Reality, the podcast where cyber threats meet the real world. Things have changed. Cyber attacks are way up. The days of thinking, it won't happen to me, are over. One wrong click, one stolen password, one bad decision. Your business is one click away from disaster. Cybercrime isn't just an IT problem, it's a business problem. And if you think your company is too small to be attacked, think again. You're not too small to be a target, just too small to make the news. The real cost? Downtime, revenue loss, regulatory fines, lawsuits, reputational damage. The aftermath of a cyber attack can cripple your business before you even know what hit you. Hosted by Don Mangiarelli of Cybersecurity Hawaii, this show dives into the threats lurking in the digital shadows and what they really mean for your business and how you can fight back. Because in the world of cybercrime, the risk is real and so are the consequences. Welcome to Risk and Reality, brought to you by Cybersecurity Hawaii.
All right. Aloha, everyone. My name is Don Mangiarelli. I'm here today with Guy Kawasaki, and I don't think Guy needs much of an introduction. Those of you that are familiar with Apple, I'm sure know who Guy is, and those of you who are using Canva to organize and create your presentations, I'm sure are aware of Guy, and then his many books that have been released about business and also about becoming a remarkable person. Guy, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Yes, thank you very much.
And I'd like to thank you for taking time out to do this. I know you're a busy guy. No pun intended.
Not that busy.
Are you enjoying your later days now?
Yeah, I'm gonna make the most of them. That's for sure.
All right, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, a lot of our show is based around Hawaii and folks that are here in Hawaii that have made an impact on the world, and you've certainly done that. In your early days, you grew up in Kalihi. What was that like? Were you a surfer? Were you?
No, listen. I grew up in Kalihi, and if you're from Hawaii, you know sort of the reputation of Kalihi. So it was to put it mildly, a lower middle income area. But I have to tell you that, I mean, as I look back, I don't say that it was like really a terrible place, a terrible time. My family, my mother and father and my sister, were a pretty cohesive group. We had what I consider a very healthy and happy childhood. Maybe I wasn't raised in Mar-a-Lago or Long Island, but I wasn't traumatized by my youth. And I went to Kalihi Elementary School, and a teacher there named Trudy Akau, AKAU, and man, if any of her relatives or grandchildren or anything are listening to this, I owe a lot to Trudy Akau because she convinced my parents to take me out of the public school system and put me into a college prep school so that I could go to college. And thank you, God, my family, my parents listened to her and made that sacrifice. So I went to Iolani, and from Iolani, I went to Stanford, and that changed the arc of my life.
And that's awesome. That's truly awesome. And that leads into my next question was Iolani, and what impact did your education at Iolani play in your later life?
Well, I would say, it was the turning point. I mean, I can't tell you that if I went to Kalihi Elementary and then I went to, who would it have been? Washington? No, wouldn't have been. I don't even know the name of the intermediate school. And then I would have gone to Farrington, and I think the arc of my life would have been very different.
I would agree with that. Being here 32 years, and when I started looking you up, I thought, okay, so did Guy take, growing up in Kalihi, did you take the well-known path into the tech industry of Farrington High School to Stanford?
Yeah, it's just like Cupertino High School. Yeah.
Right, right. Exactly. Are there any teachers that you would say, you mentioned Miss Akao, were there any teachers at Iolani that impacted your
For
life?
sure. So, first, and probably most important was Harold Keebles. Harold Keebles was the English teacher, and he basically taught me how to write. And he's a very, very hard teacher. And I think as I look back on my life, I have come to the conclusion that the teachers and bosses who are the hardest on you teach you the most. And so it's kind of counterintuitive because you're trying to find the easiest classes and the easiest bosses, but what you should do is look for the hardest ones. But that's easy for me to say, probably harder for you to do. So there's Harold Keebles. There were two football coaches, Eddie Hamada, who everybody will
Oh,
know,
yeah, everybody
and
knows
the
Eddie.
yeah, and the line coach of Iolani was a guy named Charlie Ka'aihui. And those two guys were like, fathers to me. They really they did so much for me. And I could go a long time talking about the teachers at Iolani. There was a math teacher named Joseph Yellis, a math teacher named, let's see, who was that? Wait, there was a Latin teacher named Lucio Bratcher, and I could just go on and on. Iolani was a very, very good experience for me.
It sounds that way. And your path from Iolani took you to Stanford, where you majored in psychology. So, how did that impact your career as an evangelist?
Well, I wish I could tell you that I was so smart back then that I picked this major in psychology because I knew I wanted to go into sales and marketing and evangelism. Now, if you want to believe that, God bless you. Go ahead and believe it, but it's total bullshit. I picked psychology because at the time, after careful analysis, I figured out that psychology was probably the easiest major at Stanford. So,
Right. Aside from
everybody
physical
has a reason
education,
for
right?
picking a major. Right?
Right. Exactly. Is that something that, looking back on it now, is that something that you would suggest to budding entrepreneurs, that maybe if they go to college, they might consider psychology?
I thought you're going to ask if budding entrepreneurs should, consider finding the easiest major they can. But I was actually going to say yes. But well, I tell you something. Today, if I had to do it all over again, I would major in behavioral economics. And behavioral economics is very close to social psychology.
Yeah.
But behavioral economics is the study of why people make the choices they do. And I think the world can be divided into two pieces. So you're either making it or you're selling it, and everything else you can hire, right? So
Right.
you
Right.
either got to be making it or selling it. And I'm not an engineer, so I got to be the guy selling it. And selling is all about behavioral economics. Oh, and before I forget, I remember the teacher's name. His name was Dan Feldhaus. And Dan Feldhaus, at the time, he became the college admissions director. And I don't know why, but he told me to apply to Stanford. And I don't know why, but I got in. So
Well, I mean, it's 2020 is hindsight. Maybe you were smart. You know, maybe
there
you were a
there
smart guy.
is that possibility. Yes.
All right. Well, so behavioral economics is actually quite an interesting suggestion, and that's kind of like the psychology of why people buy. Is that kind of?
That's basically it. Yes.
Wow. Yeah. So I could see from a sales standpoint that would definitely be a good thing to learn. And from there, you went to UCLA. Is that where you
Well,
got? That's where you got your MBA.
yeah, well, there was a little brief pit stop along the way. So after I graduated from Stanford, my father was a legislator in Hawaii, and one of his dreams was that I would be a lawyer. So I went to law school at UC Davis for a grand total of about 2 weeks, and then I quit because I couldn't stand it. And the following year, I entered UCLA for an MBA.
And so it's interesting to me, your path. So you went to Stanford. Is that where you did you come in contact with anybody that you ended up working with there?
Oh,
Or
yeah. I mean,
I
I
would
am
imagine.
living proof of the power of nepotism because my roommate and best friend at Stanford was a guy named Mike Boych. And Mike Boych, after he graduated from Stanford, he got an MBA from Harvard, and then he went to work for Hewlett Packard. And from Hewlett Packard, he was recruited to the Macintosh division of Apple. And he's the one who got me the job at Apple. So if you looked at my background in terms of academic or work experience, there's no freaking way that Apple should have hired me. It was purely 100% nepotism. So nepotism can work.
Well, we say that in Hawaii, right? It's not about what you know, it's about who you know.
Well, I would take it even further that it's not what you know, it's not even who you know, it's who knows you.
Oh,
That's the key.
there you go. Wow. I like that. Okay. And for a while you were doing jewelry sales, I read. Is that true?
That's true. In my MBA program, I started working for a jewelry company that manufactured fine jewelry and literally counting diamonds. And after I graduated with my MBA, I worked for them for about 5 years. And then I went to a small software company for about 6 months. And then I went to the Macintosh division.
And you at the Macintosh division, you became the chief evangelist, which is kind of like the high priest of Apple.
I mean, there's the chronology is a little wrong there. So when I started at the Macintosh division, I was the second software evangelist. So Mike Boych was the first software
Okay,
evangelist. I was the
got it.
second one. I stayed there for about 4 years, and I became the manager of all the evangelism, all the documentation for developers, all the tech support for developers, and all the Apple labeled software. And then I left Apple and I started a Mac software company. And a few years later, I returned. And when I returned, that's when I was chief evangelist.
Uh,
So I was
and
just a software evangelist the first tour of duty.
okay, and so as a software evangelist, were you there to help with establishing? I mean, let's say in the end you established a cult-like following for Mac, and I experienced this firsthand. A cousin of my mom's was living in LA at the time, and when we would go and visit him, and it seemed like every time we went to visit him, he had a new Mac. And he was just like, "This is the future. Mac is like the most incredible machine ever, and everybody's going to own one." And so I kind of, when I envisioned that you became the chief evangelist, I kind of envisioned that you created people like that,
Wow.
that were so sold on Apple. Is that how you started out, or was that your
I
intention?
started out with a much narrower focus. My narrow focus was getting developers to write Macintosh software
Ah,
and to create Macintosh hardware. But the second time, I was basically a B2C evangelist, and my job was to convince anybody to use a Macintosh, not just developers, but consumers.
well, you did a good job, because even my kids now they're like Mac everything.
Well, I don't know if it's I don't know if I did a good job, but Apple did a good job for
Apple
sure.
did a good job. So who came up with the Think Different?
Uh, it was people at Chiat Day, this ad
Okay,
agency. They did the 1984 commercial, and then they
right.
did the Think Different commercial. And the person who showed it to Apple the first time, I believe, was Lee Clow, CLOW. So I was in that meeting. It was a very interesting meeting.
And did you have anything to do with approving that and putting it out, or
No. I
no?
mean,
It's
I
just only
was
the ad agency.
that was the ad agency and Steve and the marketing department. It wasn't me. I was just along for the ride.
What what would you say was your biggest accomplishment at Apple?
Well, probably my biggest accomplishment at Apple was just putting into play this concept of evangelism. Like Mike Boyd started evangelism, but I kind of took it to the next level where, Macintosh owners became evangelistic, not evangelical. Don't get the two terms confused. We became evangelistic. Now, evangelism comes from a Greek word meaning bring the good news. So, what an evangelist does is bring the good news. So, I brought the good news of Macintosh, how it would make people more creative and productive. And today I bring the good news of Canva, how Canva has democratized design and help you become a better communicator.
And when did you join Canva?
I joined Canva 10 years ago. So this is 2025, so like 2015.
Yeah. And did you immediately become the chief evangelist there, or what was your
More or
role
less,
there?
yeah. More or
Yeah.
less, I immediately became the chief evangelist. And my job was to spread the word of Canva, how Canva would make you a better communicator, how you could make beautiful graphics in less time than it would take you to boot Photoshop.
I would even go a little bit further and say that if you have no clue about how to make graphics like me, Canva is a very useful tool from that standpoint.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I don't need to create graphics, but it's great how AI is integrated in there now. And you can just tell it, hey, this is what I want you to make, and it makes it. I mean, that's amazing. When you were here last year during Honolulu Tech Week, I heard you say something about, before Canva, creating presentations was difficult, and Canva is a way to it has a way, or has created a way for people to create presentations that's not so difficult. Is that something that you came up with as an evangelist, or is that just something that you feel in your bones, I guess?
I cannot take credit for the use of Canva in presentations, but just so people understand, the vision of Canva is that there are, I don't know, 1,000 or so design types. A design type would be an infographic, it would be a 16:9 presentation, it would be Instagram graphics, Facebook graphics, Etsy, all these kind of things. So there's like 1,000 of those. And for each of that design type, there are templates, and there are thousands of templates for each design type. So for example, if you wanted to make a presentation, you would go to the 16:9 design type, and then you would look at all the templates that we have created in advance, and you change the text, you change the graphics, and you would be done. It's the fast. In fact, now it's even easier because you can have AI help you draft the slides. So it's really kind of mind-boggling. There's no excuse for having a lousy presentation anymore.
I agree. I think one of the biggest things I learned from you in that presentation was that you should only have one sentence on your on each slide, and it should be 30 points so people can read it. And that you don't want to have a whole bunch of text on the page, because people will be reading that instead of listening to you. And that's my presentations since I stopped struggling with PowerPoint and started using Canva, and then employed that.
And just so people understand, because they may be listening to this and thinking, well, yeah, I would love to use Canva to make my presentations, but our company has standardized on PowerPoint, or, I have to give people a PowerPoint file. Well, the last step with Canva is you create your 16:9 presentation, and then you export to the PowerPoint format. So that's what I do. I design in Canva, I export to PowerPoint, because when I give my slides to, AV departments all over the world for my speeches, they want a PowerPoint format. So that's just the last step in my process.
I agree. That's exactly what I do. And then people go, wow, how did you create that in PowerPoint? I just laugh.
It's too beautiful to be PowerPoint. What did you
right,
do?
exactly. And how did you create it? Because we know you, and we know you're not that creative. Um, you have a podcast called Remarkable People. Um,
Yep.
how did you get the idea to launch that? How did you get the idea behind helping people become
Well,
remarkable?
there's two stories behind that. So, story number one is that I had just come out with a book called Wise Guy. So, I was going all over the country doing interviews with podcasters for Wise Guy. And I got into these conversations with these podcasters and I said, explain podcasting to me. Like, how do you make money? And they said, well, we sell ads. We sell one ad at the beginning, one in the middle, and one at the end. And I said, well, how much do you get for those ads? He said, well, we get 25,000 for the first ad, 15,000 for the second ad, and 10,000 for the last ad. So, I'm not technical, but I can add 25, 15, and 10 and get 50. And then I can multiply 50 by 52 and get $2.5 million. And I'm thinking to myself, God, you're such a dumbass. Why are you writing books when you can just do a podcast? So that's the day I decided to start doing a podcast. But now that's story number one. Story number two is I also figured out that that's not such a palatable story to tell everybody. So I tell people that I figured out that because of my work with Macintosh and Canva, I have access to a lot of remarkable people like Jane Goodall, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Margaret Atwood, you name it. I mean, Stephen Wolfram, David Acker, Bob Cialdini, Angela Duckworth. I could just go on. I could actually name 252 names. But so I have all this access. And I also have something that took me 40 years to achieve, which is I have tactical and practical hand-to-hand combat experience. So I'm not just a journalist, right? I'm not just asking these kind of journalistic questions like, well, yeah, at 8 years old, you saw your mother kill your father and you were covered with blood. Did that affect you?
Yeah.
Well, duh. Yeah, it affected me. I don't ask dumbass questions like that. So because of my tactical and practical street experience, I think I can ask better questions than most podcasters. So because I had the access and I had the sort of context to ask, you also have to have the balls to ask the question. And I got all three. So I figured, Guy, you have a moral duty to do this podcast to help people figure out how to be more remarkable.
Would that be from your upbringing on the streets of Kalihi?
No, I mean, yeah, I could bullshit you and invent this story that, I was such a ghetto child and I had such a hard upbringing and I had to overcome crime and drugs and violence. And so that prepared me to be a good podcaster. Now, if you want to believe that, who am I to correct you? But that would be total bullshit. I mean, I've had a very fortunate life. I have not suffered like that. But at least I know I didn't suffer, and I don't, I'm not asking for sympathy.
No. Well, yeah, I think that's probably something that a lot of us could learn from. Sympathy kind of aligns with victimhood. So,
Yeah.
I don't think I went through. I quit drinking through AA. So I thought when I went into AA, I had the toughest story ever, and I was looking for sympathy. And when I listened to some of the stories of people that are in my group, I realized that, wow, I'm not special.
Yeah,
Like my story is their story is my story. Some people have a harder story, some people have a softer story, but we all we're all cut from the same cloth.
well, what I've learned over the course of my life is that everybody is dealing with something.
Right. Exactly.
Everybody is dealing with, like, for example, I am deaf. I don't know if you realize that,
Yes.
but I'm deaf. Now, some people say, Guy, oh my God, you're deaf. How do you overcome that? How do you deal with that? That must be horrible. Well, Yes and no. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want to be deaf, but I got to tell you, nobody ever died from being deaf. And, if you said to Steve Jobs, Steve, you can either have pancreatic cancer or be deaf. What would you choose, Steve? I'm pretty sure I know what he would choose. And then in my podcast, I've interviewed people who had ALS, people who have been in prison for 22 years, people whose both parents were crack addicts. I've interviewed people who have really overcome stuff far greater than being deaf. So, I don't deserve any sympathy for that.
I'm sure it has its advantages at sometimes.
Well, when you're surfing and somebody's yelling at you, you don't hear them. That's an advantage.
Right. That's an advantage, right?
I use that every day.
That's awesome. And as we come to the end here, if you could leave the audience with one legacy commentary and think of this as a commentary that would be here after you're gone, something that might change someone's life, what would that be?
Well, at the end of my life, which is coming up, at the end of my life, I hope people say that I empowered them with my writing, my speaking, my interviews, my investing, my advising, my speeches. So I want to be remembered as a person who empowered people to be remarkable and to change the world. It's not because I gave a bigger building or there's a stadium or street named after me. I just want to have helped people.
That's awesome. I really like that. And one thing I wanted to throw in is I just started reading The Art of the Start too. And one thing I can say about your writing style is it's very practical and no bullshit. I mean, it's like, it tells you if you want to do this, this is what you got to do. And if you're not willing to do this, it's probably not going to work.
Well, I mean, in a sense, that's because I write the way I want to read, right? So I don't want to read. Well, I'll give you some real tactical stuff. Like, I love bullet points and I love subheads. So when you read my book, every few paragraphs, there's a subhead or a heading. And when I tell you what to do, I tell you in bullets.
Right.
So you can immediately see I got to do this, and this. And I read a lot of nonfiction books, and it's like 5 or 6 pages of just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of text. And I'm saying, like, how is anybody going to remember what the hell to do when none of it is called out? So I kind of think, when I write a book, I put the whole thing in Microsoft Word as an outline. I start from an outline format and I work from there. So I am very, very organized when I write something.
I will say, when I read your stuff, I have a highlighter with me for the bullet points. And that helps me to, like, kind of, as I'm outlining, that help the fact that you put it in bullet points in the middle of the page helps a lot too.
Yeah, well, I mean, after you've read about one of my chapters, you understand, bullet points, something important is coming, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to get from you is, how can people connect with you? What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Well, I would say truly the best way is email, which is guykawasaki@gmail.com. If you want to see what I'm, really excited about or really passionate about, you should probably look at my LinkedIn postings. I don't do very much anymore on Facebook and Twitter and even Threads and Instagram. You might imagine that I am not exactly politically connected with the current administration. So there's a lot of billionaires in Silicon Valley who have taken a position that I don't agree with. So I'm not exactly trying to make Mark Zuckerberg any richer. And so
yeah, I get that.
It's not that I can affect him at all, but I got to tell you, when I see him on his electric foil in Hawaii, I just want to throw up. I mean, I want to freaking throw up. I don't know. As we say in Hawaii, that guy needs a licking.
Yeah, he needs some dirty lickings. It's a good thing he lives on the chicken island, though.
If you do that, you better buy your own island.
Right. Well, he owns a big chunk of it. So the other thing I was going to mention is because
he wouldn't last long in Kalihi Valley, I'll tell you.
Right. Right. I don't think you would last long anywhere over here, especially like Waianae or Nanakuli. Because the email just came in, you can also connect with Guy on Substack and get his thoughts every day, which I will say I don't always agree with what you say, but I always read what you say because I believe that what you write has value for me.
If we agreed on everything, one of us is not necessary.
That's true. And well, one of us is not thinking, right?
That's right.
Guys, I so appreciate you taking time out to be on here with me.
All right.
And I hope to see you at this year's Honolulu Tech Week. I know it's going to be a big thing, and I know that you are a part of it. It's going to be in September. I'll send you an email about it. I'm actually going to have Michael Bennett on the show to talk about it a couple of times.
When you talk to Michael Bennett, tell him he owes me a surfboard.
I will mention that, and then I'm going to ask him to tell me the story behind that.
He thinks I forgot. I haven't forgotten. I never forget something like that.
All right, Guy. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here. Aloha.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.